This is the Ridge Hunter Outdoors podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 34. I'm Canyon Clark here with Jeff Ryan, Scott Clark. Nate's not with us again tonight. He should be with us again next week. We'll see how that plays out. First of all, sorry about last week on YouTube. If you're looking for the video there, it wasn't there. I didn't get our cameras charged all the way, I guess. They died on us about 2/3 of the way through, so I didn't end up getting that posted. And then this week, it will be audio only. I'll put it on YouTube, but it'll just be the picture with all the stuff we got going on with a little bit of dry weather in places. I'm not going to have time to edit the video. So this is going to be audio only, but it'll still be good, hopefully. But tonight, didn't really know what we were going to talk about, but I think we're going to talk, go over like the start of archery and archery hunting, at least when it started to get popular, when you guys got into it, and then where it's come from there. And then I thought maybe we could find something in there that would be a good way to continue to grow it, because it's kind of plateaued a little bit, seems like, over the last 10 years or so. I think it's gained some popularity with social media in itself, with some of the personalities that are out there that are archery hunters, but it's still in a pretty specific demographic, I think. So anyway, we'll start with where it all started, kind of. Not necessarily archery like back in Fred Bear's day, but I know, Jeff, you said you started hunting with the recurve, and then you can kind of talk about when you started hunting, and then with the archery shop too. But that would have been, what, the late 80s?
No, that was 85, 86.
So mid-80s.
Mid-80s. I bought I think it was a Bear recurve. I bought it off of my PE teacher in high school, Jerry Wilson, and he had it, and it was 40-pound draw, and it was all like, dude, pull that back. And of course, back then, using the recurves, you just went and got your wooden arrows over at your handy dandy Walmart store. Yeah. We didn't know anything about all that stuff, and you put a pie plate on a big round bale, and if you could hit the pie plate, group them halfway decent at 20 yards, well, you was good to go. And so that's what I started with. And then a few years, probably a year or two later, I got tired of that. And Walmart, you could go and buy an old not old, it was new at the time, but a PSE bow, for $100, compound bow. And so that's when I got into compound archery. And kind of the same thing, it was all new. You didn't know about matching arrow weight and draw length and all that stuff. You just picked it up and went and done what you did with it. Hope for the best. But yeah, it was quite a deal back in those days.
At that time, would Bear have been one of the more popular brands? Probably.
Yeah, it was.
Probably one of the first ones.
There wasn't that many brands back then. And then what to do, Scott? What was it? The early 90s. We started getting the Indian bows.
88.
88
is when we got into the business, and
right.
Indian was there then, but your most popular was still Bear. PSE, Pete Shepley was there. He may have still been in Mohammed, Illinois at that time, before he moved to Arizona. Those were the more, like the three big brands back in those days. There was a lot of companies out, but not a lot of bow manufacturers.
Right. I know what was Indian whitetails. That was a big seller whenever you first opened up.
Yeah.
And of course, me happened to be different. I bought a Browning, which that was a heck of a good bow back then.
Oh yeah. Browning was making good stuff then.
Yeah.
They still are, I'm sure, but
I don't even know, are they still making bows?
I couldn't tell you.
I couldn't hear.
The last one I saw was probably like a mid-2000s model that one of my buddies was shooting. Was most guys, like when you started, were they still shooting more of the traditional type bows, or was it, like when did it start to shift over to a lot of guys shooting compound, or did it kind of start out that way?
Compounds really started coming out when you say the mid-'80s. I think I was a little bit behind.
Yeah, compounds were out in the early 80s. earlier than that even. But for the most part, in this area at least, there wasn't a tremendous amount of deer, which means there wasn't a tremendous amount of deer hunters, and the ones that did hunted with shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a few of your guys that were hunting, but I think expense was more than anything.
Right.
Recurves weren't terribly expensive. There's still a ton of old ones out there, and probably 10 years, 15 years old at the time.
Yeah.
Maybe even older than that, 60s models that you could pick up for next to nothing. And like you said, you didn't match arrows. You found arrows and you shot them.
Yep.
So I think at the time, it was most cost is why people shot what they shot to start with back then.
Yeah, like I said, I paid $40 for that recurve, and
you can't buy arrows for $40. You can't buy broadheads for $40.
Well,
now.
right, but back then you're talking a 16-year-old kid.
You got to remember, minimum wage was $3.
Well, right.
I don't even know if it was that much.
So I mean, $40 was.
That's a lot of money for a 16-year-old kid mowing yards for $10 a yard. $10 a week.
Yeah.
And then trying to put gas in his truck so he can go hunting or chasing other kinds of tail. They shouldn't be.
Either way.
Either way.
How'd that work out for you?
Well, we ain't gonna go there.
Okay.
Fourth time's a charm.
Well, first you don't succeed, try again.
That's right.
So,
well, I think at least in this area, the explosion in archery came with the numbers of the deer herd.
Yeah.
Obviously, and then also expendable income helped a lot.
Right.
And about that time, you got to remember the economy back in you're not going to remember this, can you? But the economy back in the 70s was in the toilet. Reagan comes in 80, and the economy's on the upswing, and people start feeling good. When people feel good, they spend more money. One thing leads to another. The economy starts taking off, so then you have, Bush won, and then Clinton era. You have that early 90s or mid 90s era where they just, there's tons of expendable income from the .com bubbles and all those in the stock market. So that's when compounds really got to be expensive, and people were paying expensive money for expensive equipment. But prior to that, you could even go to a pro shop, but even as a pro shop, at least in this area, you weren't selling the most expensive stuff. You were selling things that people needed. People were buying a $15 sight that had 3 pins. Mm-hmm. They weren't buying a $45 sight that had 4 or 5 pins and all this other stuff on it because they didn't need it.
Yep.
So
back then they was just steel pins with a little bitty bead on them. They's color coded.
Well, it wasn't even glow in the dark.
No,
it's just colors.
Just color, red, blue, yellow, green, whatever, for your yardage. But other than that, it's just a copper pin with a little copper bead on it. And I don't even know if we had peep sights when we first started.
Yeah,
that
come
along later.
In the late 80s, I know we had peep sights. So middle 80s and stuff. But peep sights were around with compounds. The earliest ones, had the rubber tubes you lined up the peep with.
I got smacked a time or two before.
Well, you got that double-sided stick tape with the little nipple on the end of it. You stuck on your limb.
Yep.
Got the rubber tube out. And
So, like you were just talking about the sights and stuff. I assume that came after the bows started getting better and stuff. They started making better sights, or did they start making better sights and better bows kind of at the same time?
Well, they kind of had to. That part of it aspect had to follow along with how the compound bows was growing, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think it went hand in hand.
Yeah.
We had good aluminum arrows back when we had bows like what Jeff was talking about. Not everybody was buying them and spending the good money for good aluminum, but they were there. Mm-hmm. Easton's been making aluminum arrows forever.
Right.
Most people, associate Easton like in the baseball industry with bats and whatnot, but they're making aluminum arrows forever. You had charts; they matched up your draw length and your draw weight and your aluminum arrow, and they had all that. But not everybody was spending that money yet. And so I think it just kind of grew together as expendable income became more and more. People were buying more and more, and they started making more and more expensive things, at least around here.
Well, yeah, they started improving their products, and just kind of however the market went. With the, and to myself, I think everybody should start out with a recurve. I think that helped me more than anything because you had no sights. You just had a flipper rest on the side of it, and you draw and so you.
Which is basically a little spring out there.
It was just a little plastic thing that stuck out
right.
there.
Some of them were plastic. Had a little curl on the end so your arrow wouldn't fall off.
You had a little brass knock on the, knock holder where you put your knock at. Mm-hmm. That was it. And you used your fingers to shoot with, and everything else was instinct. And I think practicing with that like I did and everything, that helped me tremendously. Mm-hmm. And then when I bought my compound, my first compound, which I said was just a Walmart PSC, I think I paid $60 for it, and nothing wrong with that bow, at the time. And of course, I think the draw or the percentage was like 50% let off.
Some of the earlier ones were 40.
It may have been 40. It wasn't a whole heck of a lot.
Because at one time it was 65 was max.
I think it was a 60 pound draw with 40% let off.
Yeah, 40 was the lowest I remember starting out on a compound was 40.
And so, but then, you couldn't shoot wooden arrows in them, so you had to go to your aluminum arrows. But still, you just bought whatever was in the rack at Walmart, and throw it in there and put a broadhead in or whatever. But still, I was shooting with flipper S. And then wherever I got to where I could afford to upgrade, I bought that Browning. And, well, that's whenever we started using the sights. We had the sight pins, the peep sight, had an overdraw with that's kind of a early version of a drop away rest, wouldn't you say?
It was spring loaded.
Yeah, it's a spring loaded rest.
Like the
two wire prongs.
Yeah, what the heck they
TM
call
hunters.
Yeah, but it wasn't like that. It didn't have the shrink tube on and stuff. It was just two wire prongs up there, and where you shoot it, drop down. Not completely, but it just kind of sprung down and then sprang back up. But it was a capture rest nonetheless. But yeah, the overdraw, we had the overdraw down to, I think it was like 26 inches or something.
Something like that. Do you know Larry Stutz had a patent on his overdraw?
Yeah. Yep. And so, that's when the overdraws and all that was.
For years, he was still
coming
getting
around.
He would get a little bit of money from them once he sold.
Mm-hmm. And then, but I'm still shooting with fingers. Well, then the releases started coming out. And if you remember, Richard Woods and all of them kept telling me, you need to use a release, you'll be a lot better. And I was doing pretty good, just fingers. And finally I was like, all right, let me try a release. And so I got a Trophy Hunter wrist release with the two ball bearings and the trigger finger trigger on it. And so, man, after I shot that, it was...
Yeah, world of difference.
It is a world of difference. Yeah,
minus that one hole in the light.
Except the day that,
You got to keep your finger out of that
Well,
hole.
I was drawing back, and I don't know.
It's just me and him in the shop. And I forget, I think we were setting your sights for your release. I think you just got it.
I just got it.
Just me and him in the shop, and he draws back, and of course, he throws the bow in the air, how you draw back. And kabam! And when the smoke cleared from the light, the fluorescent light hitting the floor, he goes, I swear that wasn't me. I swear that wasn't me. I said, Jeff, it's only me and you in here, and I got a bow in my hand.
It wasn't me. It was the release. That's where we start. Anytime you missed a target, you wrote your name on it. So there for a long time, there's a light fixture. You probably still got it.
I got it. Yeah. It's in the shed.
Yeah, a light fixture with my name on it, a perfect bullet size or arrow size hole where I'd shot
like
the
a
light.
22-16 size hole in there.
Yeah.
So back up for a second on the overdraw. Explain that. What was the overdraw?
Well, I used to, like the flipper rest. Let's just say, for instance, flipper rest. Most people know what it. Well, I'm assuming most people know what a flipper rest is. You know, it was just a plastic rest that you stuck there on the riser of your bow. That's what held your arrow. And so you're shooting full length arrows. So if you bought an overdraw, it attached to your riser, and it brought your rest back closer to you, so you could shoot. So you could shoot shorter arrows, and you could get more speed.
Right.
And at the time, I mean, if you had what was the average speed? It wasn't a hell of a lot.
Less than 200.
Yeah, if you had a bow that would shoot 150, 160, I'm guessing. I can't remember now. We didn't get the chronograph till later on. But, you know, if you had a bow like that, you know, and could get that kind of results out of it, the only way you could do it was with an overdraw. Because you're shooting shorter and lighter arrows.
Right, because at the time they weren't making rests like they are now that already go ahead and sit back behind the riser.
No.
It was just right there on it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Your draw length, most people know, is measured from the front of your riser back to where you pull the string. And they would drill a hole in the center of the riser, and that's where your rest went, which meant that's as far back as you could bring your arrow. So the overdraw was basically a piece of aluminum that would bring that arrow length and your rest back towards your cables, back to closer to you, and so you got to overdraw the arrow past your draw length. Was where that came from.
Yeah, like I had like a 30 inch draw length. Well, I could shoot 28-inch arrows
Right.
out of that due to the overdraw.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now we're getting into kind of a little bit more of the innovation. Do you think that as the popularity started to grow, like you said, some with the deer population, but more people getting into actual archery hunting, do you think that drove more of the innovation, or you think the innovation drove more people to get into archery?
No, I think the industry itself, the archery industry itself, done a fantastic job of marketing speed. And so the more people got into it, the faster they wanted to shoot. Says, I want to be faster than you, whether I'm buying a Mustang or a compound bow. So as more people got into archery, there wasn't anything wrong with the equipment. But if I sold you a bow for $200 and a half dozen arrows for $25 and a release and the rest, and you might have $300 in the whole set, no faster than they were shooting. There wasn't a lot of stress on anything. You replaced your strings. I mean, most people didn't even replace them once a year. Most people would shoot strings 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. So there wasn't any stress on the equipment. So people could shoot and be a whole lot better than what they were with their recurves, and still have fun and go out and kill some. But the constantly spending money wasn't there. I got a $300 outfit that's going to last me until I either bend my aluminum arrow, or at that time, you got to remember, I could replace the blades in my broadheads. So, you know, my reoccurring cost was an arrow or two and some blades, and I'm good. So the industry, I think, done a fantastic job of saying, hey, Jeff, you need to shoot faster than Scott. And then, hey, Canyon, you need to shoot faster than Jeff. So on comes this. The only reason I need a new bow is to be faster. The only reason I need lighter arrows is to be faster. The only reason I need this is to be faster. And then 3D shoots come along, and they done a real good job advertising that. Well, you know, how do you judge yardage? If you misjudge a couple yards, how do you make up for it?
You shoot it
Speed.
faster.
Yeah. So, you know, that plays a part in all of it. And then so you start selling these $600, $800, $900 bows, or more than that now. It's the only way you can sell them, because you don't need that to hunt.
So you think the people came first, and then more of the innovation after that?
I think what drove it more than anything, especially in this area, you know, you got to remember back then we didn't have a big deer population. I mean, how many weeks did we sit in the woods and not see a deer? You know, and as the deer population grew, and Illinois went, you know, they started their archery season in October and ran it till January of the following year, you know, and the deer population grew. People had time, you know, and they got tired of just hunting. Back then it was just 6 days of shotgun season, you know, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday one weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday the next. You know, well, was wanting to get out more and do more, and archery was the way that they could do that. And I think that's what kind of stepped up and speeded up the process, and that brought more people into the archery.
Yeah, that's what drove the initial sales and the initial guys
Right.
in archery. What you're talking about, what drove the continuing sales is, like I said,
Right.
there's no reason to buy a new truck every year unless you want a faster truck.
Yeah, bigger and better.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's looking for the bigger and better. You know, and
Which is fine.
no, yeah, I've done it. You know, I bought a bow, you know, a Browning bow, shot it for a few years, and then, then High Country come out, you know, and they was faster bows, more compact, didn't weigh as heavy as what that Browning did, so I switched to that. And then as time went on, then I went from the High Country to, what did I get next? I don't even remember now.
I think you got a Hoyt. Did you get a Hoyt?
No, I didn't get Hoyt.
Then it must have been a PSE.
I think it was the PSE. Yeah. And then I upgraded that. No, I got the Bowtech.
Okay.
That's when Bowtech was getting popular. So I went from the High Country to the Bowtech, shot it for a few years, and I upgraded to the PSE. And I shot it until my shoulder gave out and I couldn't shoot one anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's good. They're getting bigger and better in marketing that, because that's what drives them to be better and to make better bows every year. Is maybe like 2021 to 22 going to be that much difference? Well, it depends on the year. Maybe they came out with something revolutionary, we'll call it, like when we went from single cam to dual cam for speed or something, for an example. But it's good because the better the bows get, the more efficient we can become. Because like you said, do you need a faster bow to kill a deer to hunt with, or do you need a lighter bow or a smoother draw? No, you don't need it, but we just become that much more efficient. So in my mind, that does a couple things. Number one, it's more fair to our game because it does take away some of that margin of error. And number two, it helps get more people into it because it's a little easier to do. Not everybody's going to be able to kill a deer with the recurve that you started with.
Right.
The same people that might not be able to do it with that can do it with one of today's bows, or a crossbow for that matter, which just makes it even more easy for those people, especially getting started, or like in your case, like you said, when your shoulder gave out. But I think it's definitely a good thing that we just keep getting better and better stuff. Now, obviously, with that comes the cost and all that, and there are a lot of gimmicks out there and stuff like that, but that's the kind of stuff that drives more innovation, which just keeps making things better, like everything else in the world. But I want to back up again to kind of that boom in the deer population, because like when Dusty was on, you guys were talking about 95, 96. It would have been around the time where we really saw that, the first boom in the deer population.
Yeah.
So what would have been what would have been the most popular setup at that time, as far as like a brand or a type of bow? Were we starting to get to more where a majority of people are shooting compound now? What were kind of some new brands coming out, bigger brands?
Virtually everybody shooting compound at that time.
Compounds.
You had your, I don't want to say local brands. There were a few regional brands, and then there was a few big boys and national brands were
Is that
there.
when Matthews come out?
Matthews was along. See, Matthew McPherson started with a McPherson, which was the single cam that he developed, and then had to sell that company off or went bankrupt or something in there. And then he started Matthews, and then Matthews took off big time. He learned that marketing was where it was at. And
Yeah,
so
the more money you throw at marketing, the better results.
he marketed Matthews far better than he did McPherson.
Yeah.
While we're on that, at one time, and right about in that era, the technology of the speed and the bows outweighed the material available. At that time, Matt was saying that they had already engineered bows as fast as you could possibly shoot, but the materials weren't there for the bows to hold together.
Well,
Now they got the composites and all that stuff is why you see in those 330 plus. But that's the
350,
technology that was,
360,
that
400.
technology was there back then because he'd already decided that he was an engineer. They had maxed out on, you can only do so much with this,
Right.
but it wouldn't hold together. the materials weren't there.
We seen that at the shop.
Well, no, I mean on a regular basis.
I mean,
What was it? The Screaming Eagles?
the flying apart Screaming Eagle.
Oneidas. Oh, the Oneidas, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, the guys was shooting. They cranked
That
them
is an interesting looking bow, too. Anybody listening to this, if you've never seen one of those, go look it
You
up.
ought to work on one.
Yeah.
You ever stand next to one when it blows apart?
Yeah, no thanks.
They.
I don't want to stand next to anything when it's blowing apart.
They were a good example of the materials not being up to the technology.
Yeah, but the guys was cranking them up to 100-pound draw weight to get the speed that they was wanting. And every time they shot, I mean, it sounded like a 270 going off right next to you. And well, it only takes the composites that we had back then.
You didn't even have any composites.
No, I mean, it would only take so much of that torque and abuse.
Lamination was the closest thing to a composite.
That's right.
And it would splinter off pretty bad.
And every time they'd break off right there at the riser, right above your hand.
And we were weighing them. You're staying with that 5 grains per pound arrow weights and all that, but it just still they wouldn't hold up.
Yeah, nowadays you got guys that are shooting, like guys that are physically capable of it, shooting 80, 90, 100 pounds, no problem with the bows we've got now. I mean, they can do it, and the bows can handle it, because like you said, the technology's there. Yeah. So, I mean, there's guys that are doing it, especially the guys that hunt out west a lot and are shooting, 50, 60 yards at elk that are drawing that kind of weight. We have those capabilities now because of that innovation and stuff, and just development of materials more so than just the archery industry. Because like you're talking about, at that time there just wasn't,
what was there was military.
Yeah, right.
The military had it, but we weren't available. It wasn't available to us.
And I'm not knocking Oneida in any way.
Right.
I know Oneida still manufactures bows, as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I know.
I don't know.
I think they do. I think I've seen ads for them before. I know on certain videos, YouTube videos, I've heard people talking about them. I'm not taking away from Oneida. They was good bows, fast shooting bows back then. They just didn't have.
Yeah.
They was shooting faster and harder than what.
Yeah.
The guys that were staying within the limitations of the bow and staying with that 6+ grains,
right,
instead of 5, weren't having any issues with them.
No.
The biggest issues they had with them were strings, and that was a very wearable item anyway. So if you paid attention to your string, kept it waxed up, and of course you got to remember string materials have changed a whole lot.
Oh yeah,
since then too. You just replace the strings, depending on how much you shot. Yeah. Of course, the guys that were coming into the shop at the time, they shot more than the people that didn't come into the shop.
That's true.
And so I think if one thing the equipment and the technology's done, I think it's hurt the shooter's abilities. Used to, you had to practice.
Well, that's where we have to be more disciplined now, because just because it is easier doesn't mean you shouldn't still put in the work. And like you said, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea, even if they're not starting out hunting with them. If you had some kind of traditional bow to practice with, it's just going to make you that much better of a shooter, which makes you, again, that much more ethical and efficient when you're in the woods shooting the bows and stuff. So you still got to put in the time just because it's easier now. But we've hit on doing Idaho's and the Matthews. Obviously, PSE's still there. Bear's still around. Bowtech coming in the mid-90s then. Many others that stick out. When was High Country starting to become popular? Because they had kind of a short window of where they were pretty popular.
They had the split limbs. That's what
High Country came. We took on High Country in the shop in about '89, maybe somewhere in there. They were made in Tennessee at the time, and then they got into that speed thing, got into some split limb thing, tried to do some stuff with materials that weren't available, and it hurt them. It hurt their reputation, it hurt their company. The split limb era was in there, and they tried to be the fastest and the greatest, and the limbs wasn't holding up.
Well, that's still, I mean, you can look back now and see what we've got. That would be where it all started. There's a ton of split limb bows on the market now, just, better designed and better developed and stuff. But obviously that's where all that kind of stuff started. And last I knew, and it's been a couple years ago, High Country still made bows, and they were shooting like 390 plus feet a second, but they were just as loud as the old ones used to be. So
They weren't that loud until they got into the speed. And I think PSE might have been making split limbs at that time as well. But old Pete had deeper pockets than, I can't think of the guy's name that owned High Country at the time. And I don't think he put all his monkeys in one barrel. And High Country kind of did. Good company to be with. I never had any warranty trouble out of them, but you can only break so many limbs before somebody's going to move on to something else, no matter what the warranty is.
So, at this point, with again, starting to get more innovative into the bows and the more brands like the High Countries and stuff coming in, were carbon arrows starting to become a thing yet, or was that still later? Or were most guys still shooting aluminum? Was it still a new thing, or was it even
Carbon arrows
yet?
came into play around here in this area when we started shooting in the 3D era. Mainly weight, because it was tough to get an aluminum arrow 5 grains per pound on your bow and still fly good. They just didn't have the spine, and so carbon arrows came in that speed era. Which would have been probably the early 90s. Because there's compound bows out for a long time. I mean, compound bows are pretty prevalent in the early 80s, really.
Yeah.
But it was just a hunting thing. You didn't really shoot for sport too much. You did if you wanted to, but you pretty much by yourself.
Yeah.
But the 3D era came along, and that's when I think the carbon arrows took off around here, and it was more expensive than aluminum, so guys didn't always spend that kind of money back then. But the guys that were shooting 3Ds that were really misjudging a little yardage here and there, it was worth it to them.
So that kind of...
And if you either broke it or it was straight.
Yeah.
So if you missed a target or if you hit a limb with a carbon arrow, you're less likely to bend it than you were an aluminum arrow. If you missed it with aluminum arrow, you're out of luck.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you remember how many... We had that tuner, remember? How many aluminum arrows did mean you retune after somebody had smacked a tree or whatever with them?
Right. And then they got weaker every time.
Every time you retuned it, they got weaker. And
So what was going on the 3D range was kind of driving what guys were taking to the woods. So it was almost like not necessarily just a practice range for shooting and stuff, but almost like a development kind of thing. Like guys would take their carbon arrows and shoot them at 3D and realize they started, they're shooting better and I can get away with missing and still be able to use
weren't
it.
shooting too. I mean, most guys had 2 guns or 200, but they only had 1 bow.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So that was the same bow they shot the 3Ds with was the same. Now, I did know guys early on that would switch back and forth that would shoot carbon. I was one of those guys that I shot carbon a lot of times on the 3D range, but then I hunted with aluminum. I just, I wasn't going to shoot 42 yards at a deer in the woods that I got to hunt in. So I didn't, I wasn't going to miss yardage that bad. I wasn't going to miss, 25, 30 yards.
we're usually lucky to see 25 yards in the woods we was hunting in.
But I didn't need the yardage mismanagement, and so I liked the way the aluminums were a little more forgiving in my mind, especially because I shot a little bit heavier broadhead than I did field point for when I'm target shooting. So I was still shooting the aluminum arrows with 130 grain wasp. Remember those?
Yep. 3-blade wasp.
Yeah, and things. If you hit something, it's going to go through it.
It don't matter. I mean,
But anyway, that was my setup. So I don't know that I was the norm at the time. I might have been, but most guys took what they hunted with and then went to the 3D range with it.
I think that's a thing a lot of people miss now. Not to say there's anything wrong with the lighter setup if your bow's set up for it and stuff, but we've got into speed is not a bad thing, but if you put it above everything else, it does, I think, can become a problem. And I'm not saying you got to shoot like a 700 grain setup, but like with the aluminum arrows and the bigger, heavier fixed blade broadheads, you guys are getting pass-throughs all the time. Well, now even you watch these hunting shows where they're all sponsored by the fixed or the mechanical broadheads, and not to say that if you want to shoot those you can't, because there's some good ones out there, but if you're shooting a real little 100 grain broadhead, out of a 300 grain arrow, and then that's your setup, you're not going to see the pass-throughs that you are, which is a more ethical way of shooting deer. I think we can kind of, I don't want to say go back, because they make good enough carbon arrows, heavy enough ones, that you can get the right setup and still see good speed and get a good balance of speed and kinetic energy and still get more pass-throughs and stuff and be a little more lethal than just all about speed.
I think you need to go to a chart and look at stored energy and kinetic energy and how one turns into the other, and then understand that you can only store so much energy in a certain amount of weight, and then it becomes kinetic energy as it's moving. And so when you take an expandable broadhead, that takes X amount of that kinetic energy to open the broadhead, which is that much less you have to penetrate the deer. Now, depending on your setup, you might have enough excess. Obviously, there's guys that have enough excess to do it and get pass-throughs all the time, not an issue. But if you're borderline, you may not. So you can take a look at your setup. There's charts out there all over the place that talks about stored energy and kinetic energy. If you're interested in it, take a look.
Yeah, and that's not to say one thing's worse or better than the other or anything like that, or knocking anybody's way of doing it. But you got to know, like what you said, what works best for your setup. And then I like to personally, a personal thing is I like to lean a little bit on the heavier side. I think it gives me a little more room for error. Because in my opinion, no matter how fast you shoot, you're not going to beat a deer past 10 yards. And even sometimes at 10 yards, if they're really jumpy, they're still going to drop quite a bit. I would rather have that little extra punch if I hit them a little wrong. Maybe still get a pass through and get 2 holes in them, or have a little bit more knockdown power in it than having just straight speed. But that's just a personal thing too. That's not to say everybody has to do it that way, because obviously I've killed deer with expandable broadheads and lighter arrows, and I've killed deer with the heavier stuff. So, but I do think that's one thing we could go back to a little bit and maybe benefit from. At least some people could. I know I did. I think I do better now with the heavier setup than I was shooting the lighter stuff with the expandables.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been with fixed blade. Well, not always. Well, I had that PSE. I can't remember what model it was now, but I got it in 2013, I think it was. So whatever was hot and heavy back then. But I went with the Spitfire broadheads, expandable broadheads, and that, and we was cranking out the speed, and I'd never shot a bow that fast before, and especially with 85% let off. I mean,
Probably.
I was shooting 70 pounds and was holding nothing.
Yeah.
Once I got broke over,
Right.
But and I shot a couple of deer with it, and I mean, they shot right through. But I hit them right. I didn't hit shoulder blades or anything like that. Double lunged them.
Well, kinetic energy is a combination of weight and speed.
Exactly.
So,
but I was shooting light broadheads, and I was shooting light arrows to get the speed. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not taking away from it. But like I told you, whenever I got rid of that setup, and because I couldn't shoot it anymore, and I went to the crossbow, I told you I want to get back to the heavy broadheads, heavy arrows, and I don't mind sacrificing a little bit of speed to get that kinetic energy.
Yep.
And
there are some mechanicals like the I think it's one of the G5s over there, 125 grain, and basically, even if they don't open up or something goes wrong with them, you've essentially still got a little bitty fixed blade broadhead, which is going to be enough, again, if you hit them right, which is what you're shooting for anyway. I think you give yourself a little bit more room for error on the other side of that, the cut-on contact stuff. But then again, it depends on where you hit them. I think if you hit them forwards, you're better off to have the fixed blade. If you hit them back, you're better off to have an expandable with a little more cutting diameter. So it all just depends. That's why I said it's just more than anything, it's a preference thing.
Right,
and knowing what works with your setup.
It is. And, when me and Scott was hunting, there's the Wasp 125s, I think.
130.
Or 130s.
Yeah.
And plus we're shooting logs out of our bows,
Right.
So, I mean, we had the knockdown power.
And you're a little quieter, too, that way.
Yeah, we didn't have the speed. We had the speed at the time.
Yeah.
But, you had a lot of knockdown power with it. And I guess as you get older, you kind of fall back to what you started on. Where I got this crossbow off of you, and I told you, I said, I want to go with muzzies.
Mm-hmm.
I'd shot muzzies before. I killed deer with muzzies, fixed blades, 125 grains. You know, that's just what I like. I'm comfortable with them. I have confidence in them,
Yep.
even if I make a bad shot. You know, and so that's just
That's the biggest thing too. You want to have confidence in what you're shooting.
exactly.
But again, going back
Not
a
to
little
a
bit.
degree that you're going to make bad
Right,
shots,
right.
But you know, if something
Yeah.
if something messes up and say you hit that shoulder bone, you know, well then you have a little bit of confidence that you're going to still maybe knock through it and get a lethal kill on it.
Like today, I'd be curious to know how many guys in their setups can tell you how much kinetic energy it takes to get a pass through on any given animal, and how much kinetic energy they have when they shoot. So how much excess kinetic energy do they have to open those broadheads or to get that pass through or whatever? You know, back in those days, and you can look it up now, there's charts that says, if you know, to kill a deer, you need this much kinetic energy.
Kill an elk, you need this. You know?
So, okay, I'm shooting this much weight and it's flying this fast. This is my kinetic energy. Am I in excess of what I need to be? And back then, that was about everybody that I know knew how much kinetic energy they had.
Yeah.
Because we had the weight scale, you know, we had the grand scales and we had the chronograph. And the charts was out there then about what they recommended kinetic energy for different North American wild game. So, and I don't know now if that's gotten lost or if it's just so there's just so much speed now that there's so much extra kinetic energy that nobody pays that much attention to it anymore. I would assume that's
I
the
think
case.
that probably has as much to do with it as anything. The bows have come so far. A slow bow now is shooting 300 feet a second, 310. A slow bow in the $900,000 range is shooting 330. So you do have extra speed to play with. If you've got a lighter setup, you're still going to have enough kinetic energy to kill a deer.
Yeah.
Now, once you start talking about elk and moose, say, and the guys that are hunting those are probably paying more attention to
I
it.
guarantee you that they are the guys you're asking them if they don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah.
So, but to jump back to where we were at kind of there in the mid-90s, so we were starting to see more of a boom in the popularity of archery because of the deer population. What about the media at the time? Was it, I know obviously with the VHS tapes, who was, so, I don't know how to word this.
Dan Fitzgerald.
You're right. So there was those guys, right?
Dan Fitzgerald was a pioneer in his own right.
And
he really was.
They were like the VHS
Ragland.
guys.
Yep. Roger Ragland.
The Drurys were
Drury
pretty
brothers were
early
there.
in on that.
Primos.
Yeah.
Yep.
So-
Will Primos and his brother.
Was there a TV channel at the time?
No, heavens no.
So there was no type of, because I don't remember when TNN came around, and then I think even before that, maybe it was ESPN had they'd have like a Sunday afternoon.
Oh, those channels
show,
were there, but you might be able to watch. You got to remember, there was a lot of people, especially not town folk, couldn't get that.
We
There
didn't have internet or dish
Satellite
or
or
none
anything
of that.
like that.
You
And
know,
that's-
you had
yeah.
antenna TV.
And so even the people that had cable, if you were able to catch 1 or 2 shows a week, you're a lucky guy.
Yeah.
But you had the VHS stuff at that time.
Yeah, and we was renting them.
Yeah, we actually had. I had. I would guess in excess of. I don't know if 100. Oh yeah.
Yeah, you
oh
had,
yeah. I had in excess of 100, maybe excess of 150 different tapes. Mostly deer hunting, some turkey hunting. You watched them when you were the kid. We would rent them, and guys were. Anytime you come out with a new movie, somebody like Dan
hog
Fitzgerald or anybody like that came out with a new movie, people got on a waiting list to rent it because that's the only way they got their fix.
Yeah.
You know, Nate talked about getting your fix. That was the way. And then some of the older tapes that weren't written anymore, we just play up here at the shop in the loafing room, just on the reel on the TV, just keep people in here watching. They may have watched it 100 times, but they're in there watching it, you know, again, drinking a soda, eating a candy bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, watch this.
It was good times. I mean, those was, you know, and I don't know, when did Bill Jordan and all them come out? They was about that era too.
Had to be, because I think Michael Waddell started with them in the late 90s as a cameraman, so they were shooting shows, and they would have been one of the first ones on probably ESPN and then the TNN as well, as far as the TV goes, when that started to become more popular.
Like you said, you had Will Will Primos and his brother, and Roger Ragland, Dan Fitzgerald. We also had Ralph and Vicky.
When did the Monster Bucks start to come out? Hunter, look that up. Look up Monster Bucks 1.
That was in the 90s.
Yeah, because they're on, like, I don't know what. They're still making them.
Because that was one of the
DVDs.
first ones. Or, I mean, not one of the first ones, but that was one of the ones we couldn't keep on the shelf because as soon as it come out, man.
And they were one of the first ones that was like a compilation style of different guys. So
Right.
it wasn't like you bought a Drury Outdoors video.
And all you're going to see is Mark and Terry.
Right.
Yeah.
Or maybe a couple of their guys that hunt with them. It was like, you're going to see this guy from this show. You might see Mark and Terry one time, and then you'll see, you know.
Oh, back then, if you got a Roger Ragland, it was all Roger.
Yeah.
That was
same
it.
way of Dan.
Same way of Dan Fitzgerald. It's 100% Dan Fitzgerald.
And nothing taken away from them.
No, that's what they did.
You could learn a lot from them. I still enjoy watching their old videos on YouTube. I mean, it's just...
Right. And that's, at the time then, and it's still the same way now, there was a lot of instruction in the videos too, because it was still pretty new. Guys wanted to learn about how to hunt and be better hunting. There was a lot of instruction in the videos, as much as there was just good content of guys shooting deer.
There were a few people had a lot of experience back then. Only the guys that had been hunting forever had that much experience, because most people were fairly new to the sport, 5-10 years at the most, and had limited success up until the mid 90s, early 90s.
Did Jim Cromley make videos? I think he did, didn't he?
I don't remember.
I know he started the camouflage innovation.
Yeah.
And to this day, in my opinion, that's one of the best camouflages there ever was. The tree bark.
Yeah. So,
I still have a tree bark overall, by the way.
Yeah, I do too.
I wear it early in the year.
Yep.
So 1991 was Real Treat's first deer hunting video. This says, I think the first Monster Bucks, the best I could tell, was around 2000, 2002, somewhere in there. So it would have been right around that era, shortly after that. And then at that time, too, you're starting to get the internet, because the internet boom would have been the late 90s, correct?
Oh, hell, I don't even have the internet now, so I couldn't do.
Well, what?
Not at home. I got it on
It
my
was right
smartphone.
after Al Gore invented it, I think.
Well,
right.
So, how much did you see?
I'm still on antenna TV at home. I mean,
How much did you see the internet affect the popularity of hunting? Not necessarily the archery industry, because obviously that affected the way people were getting information and purchasing stuff and all that. But as far as like the hunting industry and driving the popularity, did you see as much of a boom when the internet came around as you did like back in the mid 90s with just the deer population and the VHS tapes and stuff?
No.
So at that time it was not
Deer
as prevalent.
population was
number one force, I think.
number one, but that goes back to early 90s.
Yeah.
Maybe late 80s is when the population really exploded. Mm-hmm. And it took a few years for guys to get up to that archery. More deer, guys are killing them with guns. You go out there and you sit and you kill one. Used to, you sit in the tree stand with a shotgun and you kill the first thing that walked by. Mm-hmm. Well, then it got to where I killed the first thing that walked by, and man, I like to hunt. Now I can't hunt anything. Well, okay, I can go get a bow. And so it took a few years for that to come around. So the population came before archery, but I think that was the biggest reason. Internet affected the industry more than it affected the amount of hunters. It affected the way hunters bought and sold and viewed in information.
Yeah, because at that time I assume the internet was pretty limited compared to what we got now. So there was not as much content on there, obviously, as there is now, but there probably was limited to no content as far as like a hunting video type thing. I assume the next biggest thing would have been the transition into DVDs and CDs.
Transition into DVDs, but the internet, guys got their information from your local pro shop or from your monthly magazines. Mm-hmm. That was it. If you're lucky, and you got to remember, they're still maybe only watching 1 or 2 shows a week. Mm-hmm. And whatever advertisement on your favorite hunting video, but most of the information came from magazines and your monthly subscriptions. Mm-hmm. Or, like I said, your local pro at the pro shop, whatever information he had. And so what the internet did was, rather than that guy that's looking at new rests, having to wait till that latest monthly edition came out, and hopefully the rest edition had what he was looking for in it.
Mm-hmm.
He could look it up on the internet, and if that company was smart, they were throwing that out there. And so that's when the internet changed the way that hunters viewed information more than it changed the hunters, the numbers of hunters.
I think also, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but don't you agree that when the archery started coming on strong, you had your diehard gun hunters and you had your diehard bow hunters. And so they was kind of at odds with each other. And then after they kind of meshed together, accepted each other, and became one, well, now it's gone to your bow hunters, your traditional bow hunters, as far as compounds and stuff, versus your, help me out here.
The crossbows?
Crossbows.
Yeah.
And so, it's.
There were a few
There's always a little bit of tension.
Yeah, but it's friendly for the most part.
Yeah, it was. But, it's just, you'd have.
I think that the success
I think the
of the
internet,
gun hunters.
I think the internet, the VHSs and the internet and stuff helped bring everybody together as a community.
Yeah, I think the success of the gun hunters forced them, your guys that were diehard hunters, forced them to look at other ways to hunt.
Right.
Because like I said, you go out there and you kill the deer on the first day, you're done.
Yep.
Period. It's over. So it forced them to look at archery in a different light. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't a riff very long.
No, it didn't last very long. But there was a riff there.
But now
for a
crossbows had which kind of leads into what you were wanting to get into. Archery kind of plateaued out. But here, at least here in Illinois, forever you had to get a doctor's permission to shoot a crossbow. Mm-hmm. And then the local guys and even some of the industry looked at a crossbow as being the bastard hunters.
Right.
You can't pull back a bow. You shouldn't be hunting. That's cheating. That's like shooting a gun and everything else.
Shooting a gun.
So you talked about plateauing. There was always that older generation that couldn't participate in archery. Once you banged up your shoulder, or once you got arthritis or whatever it was,
which is where we're at now,
that you couldn't pull back a bow, and you couldn't get a doctor to say that you couldn't shoot, you're done. You couldn't bow hunt anymore. And so I think only in the last, and this, Tim confirmed this for me, the local game warden, that in the last few years, since Illinois has dropped that rule and allowed anyone to shoot a crossbow, the numbers have went back up again. Mm-hmm. The deer numbers, the archery numbers in Illinois went up at the same time that those permits were available to everybody, crossbow permits.
Right.
Yeah, and it's not just older people, too. That allows a lot of younger people to get into it. Kids that can't pull back a compound bow at 35 or 40 pounds, whatever the legal limit is, can shoot a crossbow at 400 feet a second plus and kill deer, and it gets them into hunting as well, and they have more time than just the youth shotgun season or shotgun hunting.
But I know a lot of
10
guys
days a year
from in the shop, seen them for 10, 15 years, and all of a sudden didn't see them anymore. They got to there where they just couldn't do it, and so they had to drop out of it or get a permit, a doctor's excuse. Yeah. And now you see them every once in a while, and they're shooting crossbows because they're able to participate again.
Yep. But I don't want to get too far ahead because where do you think the plateau in hunting numbers happened? Because obviously we got into, the innovation of archery started to really come around with the numbers, and the numbers came from the deer population. Well, the innovation of the archery continued on. The deer population has been pretty steady high numbers, except for those couple years where we had the real big kill-offs, and they've bounced back both times, and where they've bounced back now. What years kind of do you think it started to hit that plateau where it had been kind of stagnant and still is not really growing like it did in that late 80s to mid-90s period? Would it have been shortly after that, you think, early 2000s? I mean, as far as you remember, what was it?
I honestly don't know.
Do you remember the peak of popularity and when it started to kind of just stop being?
I don't know that it's ever stopped.
Well, no, but I mean it has not grown as rapidly as it did that 10-year span or whatever it was.
I'd say maybe whenever the crossbows became legal for everybody. I mean, I don't know. Help me out here, Scott. But I think whenever the market and everything kind of reached its plateau, like we said before, they've kind of reached a limit on as far as compounds on where they can go. And, the crossbows is, I'm not saying they've reached their limit, but they're pretty close there too. Mm-hmm. And so everybody kind of knows what to expect. And then, of course, you got all the stuff that we went through with the blue tongue and all that, and so we had an abundance of deer. Now went through a period where we had practically no deer. Mm-hmm. Now we're getting deer back, so it's just kind of a balance there. I honestly don't know when that really hit. I'm thinking, like 2000,
mid 2000s, early 2000s,
2010,
kind of started to peak.
2012, blue tongue hit us hard in 2012, then hit us again in 2013. We started getting a little bit of increase. We had another shot at it, another hit on blue tongue at 2015. Now, and I mean, that's just locally here in this area. Now the deer population is starting to come back. I don't know, that's the only thing that makes it more popular now is with all this COVID bull crap that we're going through, and so the prices of beef and pork and everything else, all the other foods, is going through the roof, and so people's going back to hunting deer to fill the freezers with. So,
yeah, I think, in my opinion, it probably started to peak and plateau when it was no longer the deer population that was driving people to it, because all the people that was going to drive to hunting were already hunting. The media at the time, everybody that added had kind of peaked, because you went from VHS to DVDs to TV, and the TV shows got really popular in like the early 2000s. So at that point, you'd had everybody brought in that you were going to bring in from TV shows, at least the majority. And then we had, that stagnant period from like the early 2000s to, you could argue now, at least within the last decade or so. And then I think the availability of media and the accessibility to hunting with the crossbows and stuff becoming legal everywhere. Well, I don't know about everywhere, but here, for example. Right. And then, but the availability of media, because I don't think the hunting industry did a good enough job of capitalizing on the internet success and how much stuff was getting put out there. But now we're starting to see that with the YouTubes and the Instagrams and the TikToks and whatever else. There's so much more media now that I think that's starting to bring the younger people into hunting. So maybe the accessibility to hunting and hunting content is the way we kind of grow hunting numbers again.
Right.
I'm reading an article here that says, now this is just hunters, not necessarily bow hunters, but in Illinois, for instance, there's 257,000 registered hunters, and that's been dropping about 2% annually over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Which would lead you to believe that we peaked somewhere in late 2010-ish area.
Yeah. And that's why, like I said, I think everything up to that point, we had gained as many as it had gained as many hunters as it was going to gain, whether that be the TV shows, the DVDs, the VHS, the deer population. And now again, maybe the fact that we're back up in deer numbers hasn't gained us that many hunters because the guys didn't leave because the deer numbers were down, at least not a majority of them. I think what's happening is probably the guys that are getting too old to hunt are just quitting hunting, and we're kind of losing the top end and not gaining anything on the bottom end. And I think where we can do a better job of that, and what we're starting to, is the media side of it and the marketing of it and making it for lack of a better word, cool to the younger people to be a deer hunter in general with the social media stuff and the YouTube and availability that way. Because people my age and younger than me and up to Nate's age and, mid-30s, a lot of them get their media entertainment from the internet. I mean, they're not watching TV shows. DVDs are a thing of the past. Obviously, VHS has been a thing of the past for a long time. We're starting to see a better job.
Damn, we're getting on.
But the market is, you can only saturate so much of the market. So there's roughly 5% of Americans hunt.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a small market share to start with. And so to get more than 5%, you're not going to play to us old folks. I don't care how you market it. I'm going to hunt whether I ever see another YouTube video or whatever. You're exactly right. We as an industry and as a hunting population have to play to the younger guys.
We have to do a better job of recruitment
in their media, whatever that might be.
Yep. And
Jeff's media was, VHS. You put out a new video and you get him to go rent it. Not so much for you.
Right. And that's where I think, even if it's just a YouTube video of a guy hunting that's really well edited and really well put together, that's going to get people watching it just because it's entertaining to watch. Like, the entertainment value has to be there to begin with, and then they're going to say, I like watching this, and then they get more into the sport maybe by watching it, and they get interested in what they're actually doing. I think quality content in front of the people that need to see it in their medium is the way to grow it again, because obviously the deer population is not going to do it like it did in the 90s. Like you guys both agreed, that was the biggest thing back then that had the boom. Well, that's not going to be it now. No.
But I think that there's one small fraction that I think that can't be understated, or maybe can't be overstated, is the core family as a whole in the United States is dwindled by how much?
Bingo.
Okay. Guys my age and my dad's age, their dads took them hunting.
Yep.
My dad took me hunting, or was, most dads took their kids hunting. I took you hunting. Okay.
If dads didn't take you hunting, there was somebody like Coach Wilson that took me hunting.
But
you always had that mentor.
With the families today where there's not dads in that family, whether those guys hunt or not, they may not even be there. Now, that's maybe just a small portion, but it's your generation, Canyon. It's your generation's job to take your kids hunting like I took you hunting.
Well, when you look at it at that time, like kids nowadays are just not interested in it because they have so much other stuff that's in front of them all the time that they can be interested in. At that time, it was, well, what's Dad doing? I want to go do what he's doing. Even when I was younger, when we still didn't have, it was nothing like it is now as far as the internet goes. The internet drives so much of the world today that there's so much other stuff for kids to be interested in. If they don't see that hunting stuff, they're not going to be interested in it just because their dad is. You know what I mean? Whereas when I was a kid, when you guys were kids...
Yeah, but when you're a kid, you still want to be like Dad. I don't care who you are, you want to be like Dad. So at that age, you tell them put their phone down, if they even have one at that age. Come on, let's go.
Right.
Let's get out here on a four-wheeler. Let's get out on a side-by-side. Let's walk. Let's squirrel hunt. Let's hunt for sheds. Let's hunt for mushrooms. Let's go explore the stream or whatever it might be. Let's get out here and do something.
That's what I'm saying. They have to be introduced to it at a young age, and if they're not, because we've already missed a whole generation of people that are my age at that stage, but we can still get them with the stuff that they're interested in now, getting that stuff in front of them, and marketing it the right way. And we talked about that on
you still got to have them
podcast.
dads there. You got to have them dads. You got to have them mentors. I mean, I get what Scott's saying.
Oh, yeah.
Single moms ain't going to take their kids out hunting because
Some
they
of
don't
them
know.
do.
I mean, there's a few of them that do.
Yep.
But for the majority of them, and my hat's off to the ones that do.
Absolutely.
But for the majority of them, that's not going to happen because they don't know anything about it.
And they got too much other stuff going on, even if they did.
They're out there trying to provide for their kids, any means possible. And so you got to have them father figures, whether it's a blood father, a stepfather, or even just a mentor You got to have these guys that step up and get these kids interested. And with so much information and other distractions that's out there now, we didn't have all that when we was that age. I mean, we had one distraction, but
Right.
but you know what I'm
It
saying.
distracted some more than others.
Yeah, but it's just.
And
We've gotten away.
It didn't take that long. You can still hunt.
We've gotten away from the core values and the roots of not only hunting and fishing, but just as a population in general. I really do believe that. I believe that has a lot to do with things.
Mm-hmm. And in that case, the hunting industry has to do a better job of getting that message out to the father figures and the dads then to actually be that role model or whatever it is. Because like I said, there's that generation that we've already missed that we have to put the stuff in front of where they're going to get it. Then there's the generation of guys, like Nate's age and a little bit older than him that have kids in their starting to get in their formative years where they need to be out there and doing that stuff with them that we also need to reach as an industry to explain to them how important that stuff can be and how fun it is. And that's a thing I think a lot of people miss is that are against it or don't want anything to do with it or they just don't know is how fun it actually is to get out there and do that. Go ahead.
I'm going to use myself as an example.
Oh, Lord.
You
Go
guys
ahead.
all make fun of me about, having 3 divorces. And that's...
No, we do not.
Yeah, you do.
Where would he get that?
I don't know.
I don't have a
I mean, that's fine. But let me tell you this. I don't have kids of my own, but I have 9 stepkids. Mm-hmm. Between the 3 divorces. I have daughters, stepdaughters, and I have stepsons. And every one of them I took out hunting with me. Mm-hmm. And guess what? Almost every one of them hunts to this day because I took them out there. I exposed them to the hunting lifestyle, taught them what it was about, and I've got stepsons from my first marriage. Every one of them's out there deer hunting, goose hunting, and stuff. And it's because I took the time to take them out there and show them to them. Mm-hmm. I've got stepson and stepdaughter from my second marriage. Both of them are active bow hunters and deer hunters. Whether shotgun, bow hunting, whatever. And even now, with my last marriage, I've got my oldest stepson. He's out there all the time fishing and hunting. Because I exposed them to that lifestyle, I took the time, to teach them and show them that. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I've dealt with some crap, but I've also been blessed in the fact that I planted some seeds, and I've got to watch them grow.
Oh, you planted seeds, all right.
No, I didn't, because I never had any kids of my own. But,
right.
It just didn't grow.
I planted seeds, and, I got to watch these kids grow and develop as hunters and human beings, and so it's rewarding to me. So,
yeah. And that's the thing, too.
And that's something nobody can take away from me, not their moms or anybody else. That's just something I'm proud of, is that I got to share that with these kids and watch them grow up as adults into hunters and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And you introduced it to them, and they realized how fun it is. And I don't care who you are, unless you're just a total bump on a log or some bleeding heart that can't stand to watch anything die. If you go sit in a tree or on the ground, whatever it is, and you shoot a deer, you shoot your first deer, your first buck, man, there is no feeling in the world like that. I was listening to a podcast recently with a professional baseball player, and he was interviewing another guy who had a really successful pitcher in the big leagues. He's got kind of his own hunting media thing going on, but he's pitched in the postseason on the biggest stage in sports with millions of people watching. I mean, more pressure than most people could ever imagine having on him, right? And he said killing his first buck was way more of an adrenaline rush, way more of a better feeling than being on the mound for a postseason Major League Baseball game on national TV in front of 50,000 people there live and millions of people on TV. So like I said, I don't...
I'd like to have that to compare to.
Well, I'm just saying he's got it.
Yeah, I'd like to have that to compare
Yeah,
to.
he's got it. And he says that killing his first buck, I mean, there's no comparison. It was a better feeling to him than pitching in a big league postseason game. That's why I say I don't care who you are. You just can't replace that feeling. And once you get it one time, man, you're chasing after it again and again. I think that's what gets people hooked.
Well, that's just like with you. I mean, it worked out that I took you hunting and you killed your first buck with me.
Uh-huh.
Oh, no.
Well, his
First buck with a bow.
First buck with a bow.
Yes.
It was a
Well,
first buck with antlers with a bow.
Yeah, you could. The button buck.
Let's
was-
get this right now.
Yeah.
It was the first qualifying
The first
buck.
antlered buck with a bow.
No, the first qualifying buck was
Yeah.
was grandpa at his lawnmower store.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which we've talked about before.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, I remember. It was colder than crap that day. You wanted to go hunting. I said, all right, we'll go. I took him to a spot, and I said, okay, this is where these deer go through. I've been seeing deer and bucks go through, 5 or 6 bucks at a time.
Mm-hmm.
There's this really nice buck. He's what was he, a 10, I think.
Yeah.
And I said, if he comes by, he'll be a really nice deer next year or another year or two. But, if you can let him go by, fine. If not, take your shot. And so later that evening, as we were freezing to death,
Right at last shooting light.
right at last shooting light, Canyon texts me, I got deer coming my way. I'm like, yeah, I just seen them.
Yeah, you texted me before that and said they were coming.
Yeah. And then I heard, whoop. And he goes, I think I got one.
I said, I think I got a pretty good 8.
Yeah. Well, no, it wasn't. It was that 10 part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But,
spoiler alert, he's on the wall in the
That's
shot.
right. Spoiler alert, he is hanging on the wall.
I wasn't upset about that because the look on his face, I mean, that was all it amounted to.
Yeah, and by that time I was already hooked on it because I'd had
Yeah.
those experiences as a kid where even just getting close to killing your first deer and you're up there shaking with adrenaline.
Oh, you shaking.
Like I said, you can't. There's no replacement for that
Yeah.
feeling that you get when you're doing it, and that's what gets people hooked, and that gets them into it. And then you start to teach them all the lessons that come with it and the ethics and everything like that and the values from it. But
That's the first time you drove a foul license, too, wasn't it?
I think so. Maybe. I don't know. I was probably
far.
12 or 13.
That far.
That far, yeah.
That was the first time I drove that truck without a license.
With your deer in the back
Yeah.
of it.
Anyways, so I think, moral of the story, the things we can do, because like we talked about, the same things that boomed the archery and hunting industry back then are not the same things now. To me, and I think we've kind of hit it on the head, the biggest thing is the media getting in front of people and then preaching the right message to them, whether that be the young kids trying to get them into it, the guys my age trying to get them into it that aren't now, or the guys that are of the generation before me, well, half a generation before me, getting their kids into it. Whatever message that is, we got to get that out there to them. And then I think that creates the more popularity, because the more hunters, the better. It's going to be more people that share similar values. And are there some jerk deer hunters out there? Absolutely. There's a lot of bad ones. But I think the majority of them are good people, ethical people with the right values. Yeah, they're living, clean lifestyles, at least for the most part. And just, general good people. And I think we can benefit from having more of that. And in my opinion, the more the merrier. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about tonight. So we gave you guys kind of a brief, long history on archery, at least through our eyes, and the industry, the archery industry, the hunting industry. Kind of some ideas, maybe what we can do to improve it. And we've talked about that on previous episodes too. So you guys can go back and check those out. And we've talked to some of that stuff again a little bit more. But before we get out of here, I do want to mention our podcast sponsors, and that is plural because we do have the other one I mentioned set up finally, so we got a discount code for you guys there too. So the first one that we've been working with, you guys know about if you've been listening to this, it's Rack's Big Game Supplements. They're a veteran-owned company out of northeast Nebraska. They're deer hunters just like the rest of us who at the time, they wanted more out of the mineral and feed market than there was offered. They developed Rack's products through years of research and came up with one of the best mixes available that'll improve your herd's overall health and not feeding those non-target species like we talk about. They've got minerals, protein blocks, pelletized feed, and meal feed, all specifically designed for whitetails. You guys can use discount code RHO22, capital RHO22 at checkout to receive 5% off your entire order at racksmineral.com, RAKSmineral.com. You can also stop by the shop and see what we have in stock or make an order for what we don't. Fixing to make an order the middle of this week. So if you guys want something, get a hold of us. Well, this will come out on Friday, so you've already missed that, but you guys can still order some stuff.
Go ahead.
And then,
Better make your order. I got a
Would that be
client
a
wanting
back
some-
order? Or?
yeah, we will have stuff in the store, though. So that'll be a plus. We'll have a little bit of stuff in the store. So the other one we got is Grandpa Ray Outdoors. And I know we talked about them a little bit a long time ago. We've used their stuff on some client properties. They specialize in the best nutrition for whitetail deer on your property, starting with the soil. They offer a full line of high-quality food plot seed and plant foods. They started in 2015, but John O'Brien, the main guy there, he's been in the seed and nutrition business since 1991. So back to that period we were talking about. He's got over 14 different food plot blends to choose from. You won't have any trouble finding what you're looking for on their website. They've got fall and spring blends, corn and beans, switchgrass, liquid fertilizer, soil test kits, you name it, they've got it. They aren't just about selling their products, though. They'll answer any questions you have about what blends would be best for your specific property. That way you can achieve the best results possible. So if you've got, a certain soil quality, soil type on your property, the climate and all that, and you want to know what would be best for that, you can ask him, and then he'll let you know.
Did you use that? Did we put that down somewhere?
Yes, we've used it on a couple guys.
On a couple properties in
Yep.
Kentucky?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
So like us, John and the team, they don't believe in a cookie-cutter approach like we talk about all the time. Everything's different. They don't believe in that to whitetail nutrition. They'll treat you and your situation individually, just like us. So they aren't about fancy label or package. They're about good quality seed and taking care of their clients. So if you'll notice a pattern with our sponsors, we're not about the fanciest packages and everything. We're about what's in the bag that really matters and what you're going to spend on. You want good quality stuff.
Got some good results out of those properties too, didn't you?
Yep.
That's what I thought.
So we've like you hitting
See
on there.
pictures if we were on video.
Yeah.
Can't see a picture.
We've
Yeah, I'm showing up. I'm holding a picture right now.
I can see it. Yeah.
we've used their
It looks
seed
pretty
blends.
damn good.
It's good.
We use their seed blends on client properties in the past, like what you're talking about, and the results have been as good as advertised. That's why we're going to continue to use their seed, and that's why we've partnered with them for the podcast. You guys can check them out at grandparrayoutdoors.com and use discount code capital RHO space capital P podcast to get 10% off your order. So if you guys want to check some of their stuff out, you can use that discount code and get 10% off. Or we do have a little bit of their stuff in the store right now. I think we've got some of their buckwheat, some of their sorghum, grain sorghum. There might be one other mix I have in there from them. I'm going to have some more stuff by them too. And you can come by the shop and order it as well and save a little bit on shipping. But those are ways you guys can support us. So if you like the show, go there, use those discount codes, save yourself a little bit of money, get some good quality products, and then that'll help support us too, so we can continue making this better as far as the video goes when we get that back up and running next week, the audio quality, all that good stuff. That's how you guys can support us. Other ways, follow us on Spotify, go to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, subscribe to the YouTube channel, comment on there if you want to, like our videos. You guys can keep up with us that way. Like us on Facebook at Ridge Hunter Outdoors. We're on Instagram and Twitter as well. I don't use the Twitter much, but I do use the Instagram quite a bit. That's at Ridge Hunter OD. So you can.
I heard Twitter might be changing. I'm not sure.
It already has.
Well, there's something
Bigger and better.
No,
Yeah.
there's something I can't remember. Is that? Well, never mind.
yeah, you guys. Yeah, if you missed that, I don't know where you've been, under a rock or something. But you can also check us out at ridgehunteroutdoors.com, where you can also order a lot of this stuff. Or you can get information for us about our consulting services or our management services. And then if you have any questions you ever want us to cover on the podcast or any comments or concerns about it, I don't know why you've been concerned about us. But if you did have
I'm
any,
concerned that Jeff may have been shadow banned, and that may be stopping by.
Well, what? Shadow ban.
Yeah, on Twitter.
Oh, well, that's a possibility.
anyway, if you guys are concerned about Jeff's shadow ban, send us a message through our
Support me.
website. Yeah. Yeah. So that's all we got for this week. We appreciate you guys listening, and we'll catch you again next week.